If you are coming from a Windows environment and are beginning to use a Mac for the first time, here are some things to make your transition easier. First, let's start with the keyboard. The keyboard on Macs are fundamentally different in several ways from the keyboards in Windows. First, notice that there is a Command key to either side of the spacebar. The Command key has this symbol on it, and this is what you'll primarily use as a modifier key. For instance, if you wanted to copy some text, you would use Command C. This is different than on Windows where you would use Control C. As you'll see in a minute, there's actually a Control key on your Mac as well. But that's not what you would use for copy or for any of the other primary keyboard shortcuts. You would use Command and that character, like Command Q for quit or Command B for bold. You wouldn't use Control for any of those. There's also an Option key. The Option key is sometimes called the Alt key because for years Macs had both Alt and Option printed on this key. And it is very similar to how you would use the Alt key on Windows. Matter of fact, sometimes you'll see even Mac users referring to it as the Alt key instead of the Option key. But that's what you see on modern keyboards. It has this symbol on it as well, which corresponds to what you'll see a lot of times in menu items for shortcuts and such. There is indeed a Control key, and the Control key is another modifier kind of key. And there are some times that you use it. For instance, some commands would be Command plus Control plus a letter. But you only use the Control key when it's specified that you need the Control key for that action. You don't use it for primary things like Control C wouldn't give you copy. There's another modifier key that is called sometimes the FN key, and older Mac keyboards have the two characters F and N, an abbreviation for function, on it. Other Mac keyboards have a globe symbol on it, and modern Mac keyboards actually usually have both, the globe and the FN key. Apple is definitely leaning towards calling this the globe key now, not the FN key. And that's another modifier that you use for keyboard shortcuts and also for modifying how the keys at the top of the keyboard work. Whether or not those keys are numbers like F1, F2, F3 that do shortcuts for specific apps, or whether they are things that are for special features like brightness controls, playback controls, volume, and such. One more note on the Mac keyboard. There is a key at the upper right called the Delete key. The Delete key might be more familiar to Windows users as the backspace key. When you use it while typing text, it deletes the previous character. There is no forward delete key on most Mac keyboards, although extended keyboards do have a forward delete key near like the home and page up, page down keys. If you do want to forward delete, you simply hold the FN key and then press the delete key, and that will delete the character after the text cursor. One of the things you often do in Windows is use right click to bring up the context menu, a menu specific to the item that you're clicking on. There are context menus on the Mac as well, and if you have an Apple mouse you can actually right click to select something and bring up that context menu. If you have an Apple trackpad you would use two fingers and click, and that's how it appears there. You can also hold the Control key down and click, and that will bring it up as well. And this works on just about any item. So for instance that was a folder, but if I wanted to do that for the desktop I could do that, and then I bring up items that have to do with the desktop. A lot of this can be customized. So if you go to System Settings and then you go down to Trackpad, you'll see for instance the option for secondary click. Click or tap with two fingers, and that is what brings up the context menu. If you're using a mouse rather than a trackpad, then you would see mouse here, and you could set whether or not clicking at the upper right hand corner of the Apple mouse will bring up the context menu there. Now in macOS there is an app that basically gives you access to all the different files and folders on your internal drive and any other drives. That's called the Finder, and that's roughly the equivalent to the File Explorer in Windows. In the Finder you can have windows like this. You can switch to various different modes for the window, and we'll look at those in this course. You can select files, double click on them to open those files, and do all the things that you would expect to do in Windows Explorer. You can create a new Finder window and have two open and have two different locations, one in one in the other. And now, for instance, I could drag this file to move it from the business folder to the current folder like that. One of the things Windows users usually have trouble finding is how to rename a file. If you select a file like that, the easiest way to do it is just press Return and you enter file rename mode and you can type a new name for the file. But it's also here in the menu if you go to File and then Rename. The menu bar itself is a bar at the top of the screen. Mac is different than Windows in that the menus are always at the top of the screen for whatever it is you're using. They're not at the top of the window. Top of the window may have other buttons and things. That's called a toolbar. But if you were to launch another app, like for instance let's launch the Reminders app, then I have a different menu bar here. If I'm in the Reminders app, the second item here after the Apple menu says Reminders. That tells me which app the menu bar is referring to. And then I have items in the menus that correspond to what I'm doing in Reminders. If I switch here to Finder, now you can see it says Finder. That's what I'm using. And these menus all change to reflect things I would do in the Finder. Windows have red, yellow, and green buttons at the top left. Red simply closes the window. Yellow will minimize the window, usually into the dock like that. And then it's down in here and you can bring it back. It's a way to hide one window of an app. And green by itself will switch that window to full screen mode. So it's no longer a window, but it's its own full screen. And we'll look at using full screen apps in Mission Control in this course as well. Now one of the things about Macs that's different from Windows is that when you click the red button to close a window, sometimes it quits the app, as it did there in Reminders. Other times it does not. For instance, here I have a Safari window open. If I click the red dot to close that window, notice Safari is still running. It just has no windows currently open. This is so you could simply close that window and then open a new one. It comes in really handy, say if you're working in a word processor, you want to close the document you're working on now and go into a new document. You don't have to close it and now relaunch the app to get to that new document. Closing a window doesn't necessarily close the app. It only does so when the window is the only window for the app. For instance, in Reminders, there's just one Reminders window. In some other apps, there's just one window for that app. But in something like a browser, you can have multiple windows. So I've got two windows here. I certainly wouldn't want Safari to quit if I close this window and I have another window open. And for consistency, of course, you don't want Safari to quit when you close this window because the next thing you may want to do is open a new Safari window. Now a lot of times people want to maximize the size of a window. And it seems like the green button is what might do that. But it actually enters full screen mode. You can see the menu bar is gone. And we'll look at full screen mode later on as I mentioned. But let's say you want to maximize the size of this window. One way you could do it is simply by dragging the corners all the way to the edges of the screen. But there is a way to do that with clicking. Doing it here with the Option key down will zoom. And you can see that does it. But not for all apps. What that actually does is it enlarges the window to the largest logical size. So if there's content in the window that is smaller than your screen, it won't go to a full screen size. It'll only go to the largest size to fit all the content. If you really want to maximize a window, the surefire way to do it is if you notice you double click on a corner, that corner will snap to the corner of the screen. I could do it down here. Option double clicking, holding the Option key and double clicking will do it for that corner and the opposite corner, thus maximizing the size of the window. So any corner, Option, double click, maximizes. Now of course there's no Start menu on the Mac. That's a Windows thing. A lot of the things you would expect to find in the Start menu are actually in the menu bar. Under the Apple menu you find things like access to system settings, sleep, shut down, log out, all of that. In addition, you'll find a lot of things here in the dock. If I move my pointer down to the bottom, the dock appears. I could also go into system settings, desktop and dock, and I can turn off automatically hide and show the dock to have it always there. And the dock is where you can launch your most commonly used apps. We'll be looking at how to customize the dock to put the apps you want in it. So you can use one of those. There's also something on the left called Launchpad that will bring up all of your apps and allow you to launch them in a very similar way as to how you would do it on an iPad or iPhone. Other items you would expect to find in the Start menu on Windows can be found at the upper right here as different buttons. Like for instance here are the Wi-Fi settings. Here is Control Center, which gives you access to lots of different controls across the system. When you have many apps running, you can switch between them using the App Switcher. Use Command Tab and you'll see a list of all the running apps. And as long as you continue to hold Command down, you will stay in the App Switcher, and then you could tap the Tab key over and over again to go through all of the individual apps. When you get to the one you want to bring to the front, you simply release the Command key and that comes to the front. We'll look more at the application switcher later in the course. If you have multiple windows open in an app, like I have several windows here open in Pages, you can use Command and then the backtick key, which is the key at the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard just above Tab. And this will cycle through all of the available windows. If you want something a little bit more Windows-like, you can do Control and down arrow, and that enters expose mode, where you'll see all of the windows for that app and also some recent ones. And you could select the window to bring to the front. As for Mac app equivalents to Windows, Safari is the browser built into macOS that you can use for browsing the web. You could certainly download other browsers like Chrome or Firefox or even Microsoft Edge to use on your Mac as well. Mail is the Mail app you will primarily use. Apple has its own suite of word processing apps that if you don't already have on your Mac you can get for free in the App Store. You have Pages, Numbers, and Keynote corresponding to word processing, spreadsheets, and presentation software like PowerPoint. These can actually open and save out the Windows equivalents. So Pages can open and export as Word, Numbers can open and export as Excel, and Keynote can open and export as PowerPoint. But they aren't equivalent in terms of features. There are some features that the Apple apps have that the Microsoft ones do not, and vice versa. So importing and exporting isn't always going to be perfect if you're using some of those features. But note you can also get the Microsoft apps for Mac actually in the App Store, which is where you would go to get apps from the official App Store from Apple. These are both Apple apps and thousands of third-party developer apps. And if you search for Microsoft, you'll find that you can get Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, as well as Outlook, OneNote, and other Microsoft apps. You download them for free and then you use your Microsoft Office subscription ID to log in and get access to all the features just like you would on Windows. As I mentioned, you can download lots of other apps from third-party developers for just about everything you need. So you can just search for whatever it is you need and come up with a list of apps available with reviews and all of that. You can also download and install software you find on websites. But doing it from the App Store not only is more secure because the apps are somewhat checked by Apple to make sure they aren't malware, but also, of course, there's accountability where app developers have to register with the App Store and the app is tied to them. So there's an incentive to not introduce any malware there. It's much more secure for most people to download from the App Store. But if you do need something, or if a major developer like say Adobe has some software only available directly from its site, you can certainly download it from there. How about antivirus or anti-malware software? Well, there's actually built-in anti-malware software as part of macOS. It's not right out there up front like Windows Defender, but it is there and it's working in the background. It actually is several parts. One of the major parts is XProtect, which is basically the anti-malware software built into your Mac that checks when you download things, install things, and intermittently while you're using your Mac to make sure you don't have any malware there. And it's updated on a regular basis by Apple. So you don't need to purchase third-party software as you've already got the best anti-malware for your Mac already built into it. Do note though that the best way to protect yourself from malware on a Mac is to simply only download software from sites that you trust. And I specifically mean sites. So you may trust a piece of software, say Photoshop, but don't download it from just anywhere. You would download it only from Adobe as one example. If you find some software that you like and you want to download it and you research the software and find out it is trustworthy, make sure you were downloading it from the official developer's site, because there are a lot of sites out there that will try to say that this is the software, or they'll take the software and maybe add malware to it and put it up at their own site. So you must make sure you're downloading it from the right site to stay protected. So there's a summary that will hopefully give you a quick start to begin using your Mac if you're new to Mac and coming from Windows. And of course you're going to learn a lot more about using macOS in the lessons to come.